Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the September 19 meeting of the Committee on Special Populations. This is our first meeting of this new school year. We are excited to start this year's really focus on teaching and learning, how we as a system support teaching and learning for all our students in the general education classroom. Today, we are going to begin this rich discussion with an overview. Before I go on, I would like to have a chance to introduce all of us in the room. I'm Julie Yang. I'm the chair of the committee, and my colleague, I'm going to go to my colleague on Zoom.
Yes, good morning. Grace Rivera Oven, buenos dias, representing District 1.
Yeah. And I know my colleague, Ms. Harris, is on her way, and I'm going to go to the board staff.
Good morning, Lori Christina Webb, Chief of Staff for the board.
Juan Ramos, Administrative Services Manager for the board.
And I would like the school system staff to introduce themselves.
Good morning, Nikki Hazel, Associate Superintendent for the Office of Curriculum and Instructional Programs.
Good morning, Tamara Hewlett, Director of the Department of English Learners and Multilingual Education.
Morning, Margie Lopmotsatsos, Director of District-Wide Professional Learning.
Good morning, Megan McLaughlin, proud principal of Loiterman Middle School.
Good morning, Andrea Robinson Tejada. I'm the Content Specialist for English Language Development at Loiterman.
Thank you so much. Next, I would like to ask if there are any questions or concern about our June 4th, 2024 meeting, informational summary. Ms. Rivera Ovens?
And thank you.
Okay, seeing none, then we'll just keep this moving. Okay. As I indicated at the top of the meeting, this year, our committee will be very focused on how the vast majority of our students in our special populations receive their service and instruction in a general education setting. How are we preparing and supporting general education teachers to meet the needs of our students receiving special education services, our emerging multilingual students, and our highly able students? These are the questions that will drive this year's committee work. We don't expect an administration to have all the perfect answers. Every school district is working on how to do this well. Public education has moved from a place where answers were always to pull students out to provide services in separate settings to a place where we believe there is great benefit to students being in general education settings with peers whenever possible. We continue to grapple with that, what that means for the professional development of the by far our largest instructional staff, the general education teachers. We have drafted an annual work plan. We'll bring it to the board for the full board's approval at the September 26th board meeting. Any comments before we move this forward? Ms. Rivera Ovens?
No, thank you. We're good.
All right. Thank you so much. Now, I want to thank all of you to be on this journey with us today, and I'm really excited about this year's discussion and how we set, really to explore and think about how we set conditions for student success for our special populations in every classroom in our school system. So now I'm going to give it to you to start the conversation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yang, and to Ms. Rivera-Oven. We really appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak to how we are providing support to our general education teachers around supporting students in special populations. Before I get started, I'd also like to just recognize some folks in the audience who are also here supporting us with this work. We have our unit of accelerated and enriched instruction, section here, we have Office of School Support and Improvement here, Office of Special Education, and probably many other friends back there that I want to make sure that we recognize this is really a cross-office effort, along with, obviously, our schools. So if you can go to the slides, please, and go to the next slide. All right, thank you. So certainly we agree that providing work around the needs of special populations is critically important to the district. And as you stated, really making sure that our general education teachers are well prepared to meet the needs of our students. We have an MCPS, certified teachers in special education, certified teachers in English language development who are expert in providing instructional supports for our students, but our students are not with them most of the day. And so we know that our general education teachers and our leaders and support staff really do need additional support and professional learning to provide the necessary supports for our students. But we also know and we believe that if the school district focuses on building the capacity of our general education teachers, then we can really move the data for our students. And we believe that it's not just professional learning that is needed to make this happen, but really a district-wide focus around this effort that would include how we meet the needs of our special populations with high-quality instruction, how we meet their needs as we focus on effective leadership around special populations, how we monitor special populations and think about accountability, how we focus on well-being for our special populations. Professional learning is also a really critical component around that area. So if we look at that puzzle piece, we are going to draw out today professional learning and really focus on what we need to do for our general educators around professional learning, understanding that it's multifaceted. So we're going to really focus in today and throughout the rest of the year with this committee on professional learning, and we'll delve into each of the other areas of the special populations throughout the year. So if you go to the next slide, we believe, as we set a goal for professional learning in the district around meeting the needs of special populations, that we want to equip our teachers with the skills and the knowledge necessary to meet the needs of special populations. That means that we want to challenge the beliefs of our teachers around special populations. Sometimes we will hear, whether it's our schools or our communities, those poor children, those poor babies, we don't know if they can do that grade level standard content. We want to challenge those beliefs because we know that they can, but it does require some shifts in the way we approach teaching, learning, planning, and things of that nature. So we want to change the beliefs of our teachers and our leaders and sometimes our community around what our special populations are able to achieve. We also want to make sure that as we are training our teachers, we're focusing on how we analyze data as it relates to special populations. So we want to drill into what it is that we're looking for specific to that population of students and their specific needs, and then how do we adjust planning and our curriculum resources to meet their needs. As we're adjusting, we're not lowering expectations, we're still maintaining that level of rigor. So the training really focuses on how we do that for our students. And then obviously then, how do we provide and when do we provide evidence-based interventions for our special populations? What are we looking for? How do we know when it's a language need? How do we know when it's something more than a language need? And so training to inform our teachers around those practices. So that is our ultimate goal. In some areas, we are moving in that direction. Other areas, we know that we still have some work to do. So we'll talk about where we are now, and then we'll talk about where we see we need to move forward as we continue along this journey. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So this certainly aligns with the board priority number 1, as we focus on continuous improvement and making sure that we are providing high quality instruction and focusing on improvement around reading and mathematics. Next slide. So why is this important? As we look at our special population over the last decade, we see that there's been a lot of growth in special education. We had 17,000 students about 10 years ago, and now we're at over 22,000 students. And for our emergent multilingual learners, we've grown almost 10,000 students in a decade. And so we know that certainly to support particularly these two areas, these two student populations, it's nothing that we are going to ever be able to fully staff, which means we really need to focus our general education efforts on meeting their needs. We also know that the majority of the students that we have here are students that are diploma bound. So there is an expectation that most of these students, not all, but most of these students are going to graduate, be college and career ready. And we also know that as we look at our academic data, the majority of them are not meeting grade level proficiency at this time. And it depends on the grade level and the content area, but we have many of our students who fall in these two categories that are not meeting grade level proficiency. So it is very urgent for us to make sure that we are focused on the needs of these students. Next slide, please. So today we're going to talk about the district-wide professional learning that we have provided and will continue to provide throughout the school year. And then we'll also talk about the district-level curriculum implementation professional learning that we had this summer and will continue to provide our teachers throughout the school year. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lope Motzatos, who is going to share with us the district-level professional learning.
Thank you and good morning. Next slide, please. Great. Do you want to talk a little bit about this before I go on about the
I will, yes, sorry.
meetings?
Yes, so we're going to talk at a very high level about what we've been doing at the district level, and then for our next meeting in January, we'll focus specifically on our emergent multilingual learners, and March, special education, and then we'll talk about our gifted students in May. So we'll delve deeper into those areas throughout the year.
Next slide. All right, so first I just want to give some context and talk about what the research tells us. So widespread agreement among leading researchers that professional learning is a really critical lever to improve teaching and learning. And they cite specifically, in particular, professional learning on foundational literacy and numeracy, social emotional development, equitable teaching and learning, inclusive instruction, curricula that corresponds directly to students' lives. And I think as we present today, you're going to hear professional learning that is around these exact same topics. The research referenced here and done by the Brookings Institute shows that as we improve professional learning at scale, we are improving teaching and learning for whole populations. We can keep teachers in the classrooms and stay in the profession, and we can contribute to success of innovation. So for us, and obviously in my role, professional learning is definitely a critical lever. Next slide. So talking about professional learning at scale, I wanted to first introduce this waterfall approach, how we organize and plan for district-wide professional learning. Alignment and coherence are a strategic focus of our intentional plan for all professional learning throughout the district. We also know that professional learning has the most impact when it's job-embedded, ongoing, and has opportunities for feedback and for reflection. With this in mind, we visualize our plan for professional learning to be like a waterfall of highly impactful and effective teaching and learning strategies flowing into our schools and ultimately in support of students. So you can see at the top there, it starts with the district strategic plan, which guides our work. That plan, as well as multiple measures of data and research, inform the development of the equitable teaching and learning framework and those instructional priorities. From there, we flow into two bodies of parallel work, which is professional learning designed for both school-based leaders and teachers and for central office leaders. When professional learning and school support are aligned for school-based and central office leaders, everyone receives a consistent message that is focused on the same instructional priorities. This is essential in order for the most effective and efficient changes to happen in instructional practices and student outcomes. Next slide. Now I want to get into some details on our goals for district-wide professional learning for this upcoming school year. We have some feedback from school leaders and teachers. They continue to express the need for continued professional learning to support the needs of emergent multilingual learners, students receiving special education services, Black and African American and Latino learners. Leaders then, when we asked further details, they specifically requested learning around understanding grade level expectations and anticipating misconceptions, instruction that connects language and content, analyzing data and providing feedback, and affirming students' identities and strengths. So professional learning across multiple venues, including ANS meetings, school leader learning, teacher leader learning, and then the 2 district-wide professional learning days that we have this year will center around these topics. In addition, we got feedback from teachers who participated in learning over the summer, and they requested additional professional learning on curriculum and instructional resources, equitable teaching and learning practices, and equity-centered capacity building, and co-planning and co-teaching. So based on all of that feedback, a cross-office team identified the following goals for all of the district-wide professional learning for this year. Our goals are that schools achieve their school improvement plan goals with a focus on emergent multilingual learners, students receiving special education services, and Black and African American Latino learners. And we also want for their year 2 SIP school improvement goals, because this is a 3-year, the school improvement plan is 3 years. They're in their 2nd year with the school improvement plan. We want them to be able to reach their achievement and growth goals for these special populations. So those are our goals for this year. And next slide. And now I want to talk to you a little bit about how we're going to do that, what we're focusing on. So first, with leaders, we are working on professional learning to change adult practice in 4 particular areas. The first one is that we want to work with a school leadership team so that they will ensure that teachers adopt the new curriculum or system-wide curriculum, and they use the appropriate observation tools to give teachers feedback on that use of the curriculum. School leaders will identify and change inequitable school structures so they result in more equitable outcomes for students, especially our special populations. And I wanted to give you an example here of what we're talking about. Last year, while we were doing our professional learning, we realized that because of some scheduling challenges in the elementary grades, emergent multilingual learners were being pulled out during Tier 1 instruction, during reading and mathematics instruction. And we know that they need to be in there for that instruction. We talked at the top of this presentation a little bit about that. So working with school teams to figure out how they can rearrange their schedule so that we do have emerging multilingual learners in the classrooms for that reading and mathematics instruction so they can be successful with grade level standards. We are also working with leaders and providing them the tools and the professional learning so that they can consistently observe planning and instruction with a focus on specifically these special populations. Leaders will learn more about how to do this and receive the tools that align with best practices in the school leader learning, professional learning that we have quarterly throughout the year. And finally, we'll be working with leaders to ensure they are able to and consistently provide high-quality, bite-sized feedback based on observations. The feedback, we expect that the feedback will produce noticeable results in teachers' knowledge, skills, and beliefs, changes in student learning, and operational excellence. So that's what we're working on with leaders. And if you go to the next slide, with teachers, we are working on additional 4 changes in teacher practices. We are working with teachers, and we want them to be able to challenge their beliefs about what all students can do and communicate those high expectations to all learners, especially focusing on students in special populations. We will work with teachers so that they can create and maintain classroom environments that affirm student identities. And we will work with teachers so they can use the curriculum resources to implement instruction and program guidance aligned to grade level standards. And for example, this summer we worked with training over 4,000 elementary teachers on the new curriculum. And a focus of that was how to use those curriculum resources to plan, to teach, and to assess students as they develop their reading abilities. Teachers will effectively be able to use feedback from the leaders, so those observations we talked about earlier, and consistently collect and use data from daily grade level standards aligned instruction to modify future instruction. Next slide. So earlier in the presentation, I talked about the concept of the waterfall when we think about district-wide professional learning. Then I shared the goals of what we are working on this year with leaders and teachers in professional learning. Now I want to show you what that looks like in a timeline and how that plays out. So first, if you take a look at the date column, you'll see the times in which we are engaging in the professional learning. And then in the next column, we detail the venue and the who we'll be working with. Finally, we detail the high-level focus of the learning and the alignment to the goals that I just shared. For example, you see this summer we required that all administrators were to engage in professional learning on the instructional priorities as they relate specifically to special populations. We built on that learning in the administrative and supervisory meeting this summer, and then in our upcoming school leader learning that will take place next month, we will get more into the specifics on the observations. And that learning, you can see it builds on itself throughout the year, and it's aligned across the different audiences. Another example of this plays out in the learning we provided this summer to talk about specially designed instruction. We had lead elementary school teachers and a school-based administrator were invited to attend and required 6-hour professional learning entitled Specially Designed Instruction that align with IEPs. This session's focused on specially designed instruction to meet the needs of students receiving special education services through a focus on differentiating or modifying the content, methodology, or delivery of instruction. This professional learning session focused on that leadership goal number 1 and goal number 6 for the teachers. 303 staff members attended the sessions. 141 of the participants completed the evaluation, in which 100% of them were able to identify the components of specially designed instruction. Then throughout this quarterly leader learnings, the special education department continues to collaborate with the design team to make sure we continue to evolve and develop that professional learning and that conversation in those sessions. So school leaders receive the learning, and then we have teacher leaders receive the learning, staff development teachers, reading specialists, content specialists receive the learning, and then they take that to the teachers in the schools, that same learning. So we're having alignment and coherence around all of the learning that we're providing, and that cycle repeats itself 4 times throughout the school year. So up here I have marking period 1 to show you, but that same flow repeats itself throughout the year. And I also wanted to just point out around the alignment and coherence of both the macro learning, so that's the big learning that we had, the ANS meetings, the school leader learning, all of that learning this summer around the new literacy curriculum. That's the macro. It connects down through to the micro learning, and that's the learning that happens when the reading specialist is sitting with in the collaborative planning meeting with a grade level team, or the principal is giving feedback based on an observation. And the research tells us that it takes as little as 15 minutes of professional learning to be able to change a teacher practice. So that's why that alignment of the big learning to the little learning is so crucial, and it has to be ongoing. So we work across offices to be able to develop this professional learning. We have cross-office teams working with us, and then we have representatives from the different audiences in which we're developing the professional learning and offering the professional learning, a part of the design teams to help us know, does this sound right? Will this work? And then to evaluate all of the professional learning. Do you want to add something? Okay, next slide. Before I end, I just want to take a little bit of time to talk to you about what's upcoming in the district-wide Professional Learning Day this October. It relates specifically to special populations. As I mentioned earlier, both school leaders and teachers expressed the need for continued support in meeting the needs of multilingual learners, students receiving special education services, and Black and Latino learners. So we have designed a 2.5-hour asynchronous learning experience for educators to engage in learning that focuses on these special populations. It's grounded in the equitable teaching and learning framework, and it has opportunities for teachers to watch videos of our own MCPS teachers working effectively with these special populations. Next slide. So more specifically, with this professional learning, there will be learning focused on instruction that teaches language and content, understanding grade level expectations and anticipating misconceptions, analyzing learning and providing feedback, and affirming student identities and strengths. We will ask educators to try 2 of the strategies that they learned during this learning, and then we will check back with them on the impact of using those strategies with the practices, and then again, the follow-up in alignment with that waterfall approach that I spoke about today. Now I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Tamara Hewlett.
Before we turn it over, do you want to stop for questions, or would you like to continue?
I think we should stop for some questions for now, and then what I will do is, I know all 3 have questions. I would say we each go 2 questions first, and then if we have more, we'll come around. Okay, I will start with clarifying questions on slide number 5. We definitely see the enrollment growth in both our students having IEPs and our emerging multilingual learners. It looks like in the 10 years, we have 30% growth in students with IEPs and 40% growth in emerging multilingual learners. With these numbers, do we know, do we keep bigger category? I understand special education. Do we know what percentage of special education students are spend the majority of their day in our general education setting? Do we know that data?
Come on up. Why don't you come on up? Yeah, just take that seat up. Yes, thank you.
Good morning.
we go. Kelly Giron, Supervisor, Specially Designed Instruction in the Office of Special Education. It is just shy of 70%.
70% of
Yes.
these students, so super majority of them are in our general education setting. Thank you. Now, can we go to slide number 9, that beautiful waterfall? Okay, so I understand the theory and the methodology behind this approach. My question will be, we have 211 schools, 25,000 professional staff, plus supporting staff, in addition, working with these students, right? So how do you know, like you start with school-based leaders, or you start with central service leaders. How do you know whether what they're doing, how do you monitor what they're doing in their school building? And how do you measure whether that's successful? And how can we maintain some sort of consistency for the MCPS brand, that this is how we support students in the general education classroom? I know that's a big question, but I would really like to know.
Yep, it's a big question and something we're working on. We don't have it perfect.
Absolutely.
We don't have it perfect, but it's an important focus, and it's multi-pronged approach. So we all need to work on it, and I'm going to explain what we're doing to evaluate the impact of the professional learning. And then Mr. Sean McGee is here, and he's going to talk a little bit about the role of OSSI, the Office of Strategic
Support and Improvement,
and how they play such a critical role in supporting these efforts. So
Thank you.
First, in the professional learning, every time we have these quarterly school leader learnings, and we work on, for example, this upcoming one, we're working on that observation cycle, and we're talking about effective ways to set up your observation schedule, and working on some templates and criteria for effective tools to observe teachers. They're going to have to go use those tools and then come back, and we're going to talk about what worked, what didn't work. Did they were giving feedback? Did that change? Did that not change? So every professional learning that we provide, there's a task that folks have to do, and then they come back and we evaluate the impact of that, look at making adjustments and moving forward. We used this same process last year. What we focused on was a smaller component of this, and that was how do you give teachers bite-sized feedback that they can use and help them change their practice. So that was something that we focused on last year. By the end of the year, so first we looked at how does that change teacher practice, and then we looked at how does that impact student achievement. We could tell from the data that we collected over the course of the school year that 76% of school leaders reported that they had a change in student achievement based on those specific professional learning we were talking about, and they measured in their school improvement plans. Then when we focused on special populations, 71%, so a bit lower, but still achievement when we focus specifically talking about change in teacher practice impacting student achievement. So that's the first time that we actually were able to, last year, be able to look at that impact. And this year we learned a lot from how we did it last year, so we can improve how we collect, how we analyze, how we support the school leaders as they make these changes. But that's what we're working on. That's an example of how we're measuring change and impact in the professional learning. Now, in conjunction.
So in conjunction, I'll start with the school improvement plan that has goals that the schools are working on. We start at goal-setting meetings with directors, principals at the one-on-one level, moving into then monitoring through school improvement review. And we're doing that in conjunction with the Office of the academic officer. We're doing that together. And then we'll go supervisory visits. And part of our supervisory visits that we did last year that we had a lot of great feedback from principals is doing walkthroughs through the building. So we can go and see the professional development that has been given over the summer, been given during the school year. We can walk into the classrooms and actually see that. And then we're also taking a look and monitoring the achievement goal, the data, and making sure that the goals are being met. And this process happens throughout the school year. So multiple supervisory visits, multiple check-ins from directors from the Office of School Support and Improvement to make sure that everything is on track. And if it's not, we can provide support for them, either by extra professional development support from our office as well.
So just a follow-up to understand that we use data to make the SIP school improvement plan. And then throughout the year, we monitor it, and that drives the school-specific staff development agenda. Is that how I understand?
Yeah, that's correct.
In general, how many times do we do these, like check-in, measure, or walkthrough, or whatever we are doing?
Well, it's probably around 4 to 5 times a year where we start, the goal setting is starting somewhere around July and August when we sit down with the principal. Supervisory visit, what we call number 1, is typically September, October. Then we do another one in February. Then we do another one at the end of the school year. So those are the official ones where we're coming in. Sometimes we come in with other offices to help support them and do those walkthroughs. But there's also check-ins coming through when schools will get their data as well. We'll review that data and then go and meet with them. So it's really continuous throughout the school year, really looking very carefully at that data, at the data that's in the pathways, the MAP-R, DIBBLES, all of the data points that we've been getting training on to make sure that that needle is moving. We're constantly watching that. And we do it together. It's not like, looking at it and using it as a hammer. Like if we see, even celebrations or areas of need, we can reach out to the school and say, hey, let's partner together to see, what changes we can make to move forward.
I'm going to, I'll call it Ms. Harris.
Yeah, thank you. I have I don't know if this is a follow-up question or a clarifier, but you mentioned school leaders looking at last year changes in student achievement throughout the year based on changes in teacher practice, and 76% said they saw. So are we saying 76% of school administrators, so principals, said based on the teachers who had changed their practices, they were seeing a difference in student achievement?
Yes.
Okay. And 71% of those principals said they were seeing a change in achievement in their EML populations based on a change in teacher practices. But is that, so how are you identifying which teachers have changed their practices so that that number is, or that data point is meaningful?
So the principals, the school leaders, they are looking at those that they do the observations of and provide the professional learning to at their school, and then look at the student data associated.
Okay. And so they're seeing a change, but we don't know the magnitude of the change.
That's right. We don't have the magnitude just yet.
When will we have that?
We're hopeful this year we'll be able to see some magnitude of those changes. I mean, they say increase in student achievement. What's the magnitude of that increase in student achievement? We have to evaluate that this year with our leader learning.
Yeah, and also, students are moving through, and so how we're looking at both teachers and the impact of their practices in the classroom on whoever's in front of them, but also the students as they move along over time. So two different things, and we're looking at both.
Yes.
Okay. Just trying to wrap my head around it. And then I guess just following up on Ms. Yang's question around if we're looking at this, so some of this training is central. So the people go in, the team leaders and the administrators go, but we also mentioned the evidence shows that the real magic happens inside the classroom with the teachers, and that this training needs to be job embedded, ongoing, with feedback and reflection built in. So happening not at these big, all of us are coming together, but what those people are taking into their schools and then working alongside their educators. So how are we holding people accountable to going from here, where we're going, the leaders, the team leaders, the administrators are going and they're getting trained, and then and the content specialists, and then they're coming back to their schools, and then that expectation is they're translating that. And how are we holding them accountable and making sure this is actually happening in every school with every educator?
So I'll give you a practical example of that. So summer training, where I'm just going to use math training from the elementary level. They invited all of the schools, an elementary leader, the principal, obviously, and then an instructional leader, to have an overview of looking at planning and trying to make sure that that's going to have its impact in the classroom. So yesterday, I'm coming to a school, Woodland Elementary School, and sure enough, I can see the content specialist there, staff development teacher with the principal, and then a representative, Sheila Berlinger, is there from the math department, talking about the follow-through from that global training that was happening in the summer. She's meeting at the school level, working with the staff development teacher to provide even more feedback and guidance for that team as they move through from the big training to say now it's happening at the school level. And I will say we'll put that back on our office again as an oversight to say we're monitoring to make sure those follow-through trainings are happening with the schools, which they are, because like you said, Ms. Harris, the impact happens when it's in the classroom, and we want to make sure it's getting there, and through walkthroughs and through collaboration with us in the Office of Curriculum, we saw that happening. So just a real-time thing where I was there yesterday to be able to give you a perfect example of how that's working right now in the system.
Okay. Lots more questions, but I will let Ms. Rivera-Oven.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So for me, slide 5 on our special population, awful, quite honestly, because it really doesn't tell me a lot of the breakdown of the students that we are dealing with. So, for example, we know there has been a growth according to presentations between EML students, right, and special ed. That population, I don't see that population represented. And there's just so many other groups, the growth with our children in autistic programs and so on. So there's just a lot missing for me personally to be able to understand exactly where we need to make some of the improvements and changes. So, Mr. McGee, it sounds like your department has a lot of this data that Ms. Harris and Ms. Yang were kind of talking about, the whole thing with improvement. I'll give you an example. I would love to know, at least in my district, right? Because you have some schools that have overrepresentation of populations, like cases for high school. They have, I think, every special program that we offer, right? So obviously, their numbers are going to be higher and their needs are going to be higher for more support. So for me, it's just like the breakdown of who these 32,800 students are with the EML and who are the 22,000, and geographically where they are. And when you do that breakdown, you said that 70% of the majority of the kids are in regular classes. So for me, it's like breaking down that 70%, right? It's seeing who they are. And then there was comment made that the majority of them are not meeting academic expectations. So the majority of who in that 70% are not meeting expectations. And for me, it'll be helpful to know where they're not meeting expectations. Because if we have a plan, like you said, where we are doing the staff, and one of your colleagues said that it only takes 15 minutes of professional learning training to make those changes, which is unbelievable to me. So there's just so many things missing for me. And I know that you mentioned that our administrators over the summer took the training, and you did say how many folks in the ANS meeting. There were like 303 folks who took and completed, right, the training, but you didn't say how many of all administrators. Was that like 100% patient? And as I said, there's schools that have more needs than others, and then the other 30%, like who are those kids? What kind of services? What kind of training are kids receiving? There's just so many questions that I have. I don't even know where to start, but I just would like this to be to have a little bit meat on the bones, because this is just very, yeah, we know that, we grew from 17,000, 2013 to 2014 to 22,000. Okay. And then that we grew up by about another 10,000 in the EML kids. But again, it doesn't tell me where sometimes those cross, which I know is a concern for a lot of, especially for a lot of the Black and brown parents out there, and just not getting a whole picture. I know what we're doing, and I think it's great. Again, to the accountability question, who does the accountability? How does that look like? And what does progress look like? Like, Mr. McGee, you have some of those answers, but this is so general to me. I'm sorry. It's just I'm not really I'm not getting a whole picture.
And we appreciate that feedback. That was our intent for this first meeting, was to be high level in general, because we will be delving into each of the populations at further meetings. And so emergent multilingual learners will be in January, where we were really going to dig into who those students are, what does the data say about the students in terms of where we need to move with the professional learning, and then moving on to special education, and then our gifted students. So that was our intent, but we do appreciate the feedback.
Thank you. I have another question. So on slide 13, I appreciate the list of marking period 1 professional learning opportunities, and who they are targeting and what's the focus. Now, you mentioned during the summer, for example, 4,000 teachers, or over 4,000 teachers were trained for the new elementary school curriculum, reading curriculum. Now, my question is then, who's responsible for modification, right, of the curriculum? Is it the classroom teacher? Now, for example, if I have a student that has visual processing issues in my classroom, whose job is it to modify that curriculum to meet the need of this student? And how do I know that it's the appropriate modification? And how do the teacher know that, who evaluate whether that modification has been effective? And who will work and support the teacher to say, okay, then this is good, and this is an extension, there's more we can do, or this is a different strategy to try. So help me visualize it.
So if we're talking about a student who receives special education services, a lot of that is done through the special education process at the IEP meetings. So this is where the school team, the classroom teacher, the special education teacher, the parents come together to delve into each individual student's annual progress. And a lot of the modifications that you're talking about would be documented on the IEP. which is that individual education plan that a student receiving special education services, that's what we implement. And those are typically evidence-based strategies, and by documenting them on the IEP, we are saying that the student legally needs these individualized modifications, supplements, and so the classroom teacher, along with the special education teacher, would make any adjustments necessary. With that said, there are school-based supports to help for when we're speaking specifically to the reading curriculum. There's a reading specialist in every school that can support that work from the literacy lens. There are also people like myself in the Department of Special Education Services who have a background in curriculum and instruction and can support the school all the way from a higher level when we're working with multiple schools, all the way to going into that school and supporting whether it be a whole school team or individual teachers with those adjustments. And when it's from my office, it's typically through the lens of that individual student need or a group of students that have similar needs. My team works very collaboratively with the curriculum office so that when we make modifications or adjustments, they still adhere to grade level standards so that we are preparing our students for high school graduation.
So I'm going to use that example again so that I can really see what's happening on the ground in the classroom. So I'm a teacher. I have a student with visual processing issue, and the IEP identified this is the issue, and maybe does the IEP also say what strategies to use, or the IEP just have a goal of what to do?
It does both. There's a specific section of the IEP called Supplementary Aids and Services that lists out things that we have evidence that each individual student needs. And I can give some examples that might help.
Right.
An example would be concrete manipulatives. So actually when we're in math, using those concrete objects to help learn those math concepts that are more abstract and harder to learn. That's a specific strategy that is very beneficial for students with different disabilities. Another example would be providing sentence starters. So when a child is working on written expression and needs some help generating ideas around a topic, working with the student to provide some sample sentence starters in a very simple form if the topic is around what I did over the summer. So my family or I went, so providing those starter ideas. Those are just a few concrete examples that we would document.
That's helpful. Now, then let me ask you further. Okay, maybe the strategy is start a sentence starter, or maybe the structure, a suggestion for this visual processing student is highlighting words, right, or putting on walls or whatever, right? Then whose job to do this? Is it the classroom teacher? And how to do this is the classroom teacher's job to do this, supporting materials or modification of materials? Is that so?
That's a really good question. It's a collaboration between the classroom teacher and the special education teacher.
Okay, so in the ideal world, every day with the planning, this week we are having we'll go through two articles in this book, or this, and then so that it's the teacher and the special education teacher have to collaborate to do the modification for each of the students in their room. Same goes with emergent multilingual students.
Good morning. Thank you for allow me to weigh in. So the word modification on our side is a very technical term, and so modifications really lends itself to students receiving special education services. I think your general question is talking about who's responsible for providing the scaffolds and making content accessible to kids. I think that's your overall gist of your question. So when it comes to ELD, English Language Development, yes, students have designated English language development services, so they receive direct services from an English language development teacher. But as Ms. Hazel outlined in the beginning, they spend most of their times in general education classrooms with content teachers. And so, yes, our classroom teachers are expected to also provide those scaffolds and supports during, social studies instruction, math instruction. Many of our curricular resources have some suggestions around ways to scaffold depending on the student's level and the student's need. But what it requires is a classroom teacher to deeply know their students and kind of understand language acquisition and the trajectory to be able to know how to match certain supports and scaffolds to what students need. So that, it is nuanced, but they have partners with the English language development teachers who have their caseload to provide student services to, but they attend planning sessions as much as possible, as much as the master schedule allows, to then be able to serve as a lead on saying, this week we are going to work on the American Revolution, and there's some really highly technical vocabulary. Here's some, I know you have this student in your class or these levels in your class. Here's one way to be able to scaffold the lesson, and here's some suggestions. That doesn't always get to happen in that way because the ELD teachers can't be everywhere at the same time. So it is important for our classroom teachers to be getting that learning, to be able to make those adjustments, and to learn from the ELD teachers when they have access to them in those planning sessions. But yes, more and more as we see the numbers growing, more and more students are in our classrooms, and they all have their own story and their own individual needs. It's not like one blanket wand that could be applied to all of the students who are receiving English language development services in the class. But it takes a teacher knowing their students, understanding their proficiency levels, what they can do, and how to leverage those areas and modes of communication to be able to then support the student to continue to learn and grow.
Okay, so my last question before I go to my colleague, if we know to support our emerging multilingual, there are some strategies that's good for all students, right? And also for every student in the classroom. Do we develop a plan to say, this quarter, we're working on this strategy, our training is on this strategy? Next quarter, do we have a master schedule of training? Do we, or is there a need to develop such a?
So we don't have just one particular strategy, and it's nuanced. Every school is different, and so that's why it's important for the school improvement plan to kind of drive what happens at the local level. We do provide learning around different strategies, and then that way schools and teachers have a bank to say, this based on our root cause analysis structure, when we dug into our student data, we noticed at this school, and I don't want to steal the thunder of our school partners who are going to tell you kind of their journey, but you can look at data and really drill down to patterns that exist across schools. Every school doesn't have the same type of pattern in terms of needs that arise for, I'm speaking for students who are receiving English language development services, but they have the learning to be able to then provide the targeted support. Are there things that we can do whole scale, yes, and that's kind of why we are championing the district professional learning that we are having and trying to make sure that we incorporate those broader learning opportunities so that everyone has access to it. And then it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we are partnering with OSSI to make sure we're going into the schools who have done the deep work to determine, hey, I know that my students are struggling with oral language development. Can you support us in this way? Our team goes out, we work with our content partners, and we go out to support the teacher leaders and the staff at the school to then drill into those specific, school-specific needs.
I appreciate that answer. For me, though, I always feel like there should be some baseline skills that we all need to have, some baseline strategies, or we need to have, okay, for English language learners, what is the, look at our data. Look, we have all the testing, we have WIDA testing, we have MAT-R testing, you know, all these. Is it decoding the issue? Is this is the issue for our emerging multilingual learner? So if it is the predominant issue across the board, can we have some baseline knowledge and skills to impart to our teachers? I feel that that is a good place so that there are going to be nuance in each classroom, but shouldn't we have some baseline understanding and skill sets in our toolbox so that we can use, right?
And we would love to share that with you. Grounded in the equitable teaching and learning framework, we created what we call the essential habits, and it's the essential habits of what teachers should be doing and what leaders should be doing before instruction, during instruction, and after instruction. And it specifies these different strategies that you're referencing. So we'll make sure that you get a copy of that so you can see it. It's what we spent all of last year in the big leader learning working on, and now this year we're getting into some of those specifics. We like the ones we really know will make a difference with, for example, emerging multilingual learners, talking about language and content, how you have to teach and think about the language, the language concepts that students will have to understand, and then the content. So that's what's focused of the district-wide professional learning that's coming up. That's a reason why that's such a big focus. So I'll make sure we share it with you.
All right, so I'm going to my colleagues.
Thank you. And I want to do a quick follow-up question to one of Ms. Rivera-Oven's questions, which was, as we look at our population that's in our schools and the growth in those populations, which I think is greater than being proportional to the overall system-wide enrollment growth over that decade. But where these students are is very important. And a lot of what you're describing is very people, the training, the observation, the coaching, the monitoring is very person intensive. And so it's the difference between equity and equitable, which this school system has been talking about for a long time but not really doing much about. So are we equitably differentiating our resources so that where we have these schools, these students concentrated, we're spending more time, you know, the OSSI team is there more, the curriculum team is there more, or are we doing everybody gets the same?
So we are doing definitely differentiated. And so we're looking at schools, looking at the data, looking exactly what you said, where the students are who have the most needs. We are partnering again with other offices to make sure that we are supporting. And sometimes we're doubling up our directors. We're doubling up our learning achievement specialists. Sometimes instructional specialists are going in there. But that is exactly the plan. Dr. Moran's vision, Dr. Taylor's vision this year is about differentiating. Instead of giving everybody the exact same, what we're doing is looking at the schools, the places that have the most need, and making sure that we're differentiating our supports to get to those schools.
And I'm glad you mentioned the learning achievement specialists, because having talked to a bunch of them over the years, some of our conversation last year, there was a lack of fidelity in how they were being deployed. And it seemed to be, there was also a lack of fidelity in how directors were partnering with their learning achievement specialists. Has that been tightened up?
Very much so, yeah. And we just had a meeting this week to talk about that, to look at how we're using our resources and align them in a much different way than we have in the past, and make sure that we're being very specific towards the students in the schools that have that need. So I would think if you asked, I would say give it a month or two of how we're now just making these adjustments to that. But if you ask the LASs, the learning achievement specialists now, even the directors, they'll say it's much more specified in terms of the needs where the schools are.
Thank you. And I do see, I mean, I've been in a lot of schools over the past 3.5 weeks, and I'm very positive energy. Every principal I've spoke to feels so much better supported than they have been in the past. And I really do appreciate what the schools team is doing. And I just congratulate my colleagues again for seeing the need to shore up that team and add those positions. So I very much appreciate that work. But getting back to the accountability piece. So when you, for instance, you've referenced the district-wide training happening next month. It's almost next month. 2.5 hours asynchronous. Is it a cafe option where teachers choose, or is everyone expected to do the same training? I'm guessing differentiated by level.
Differentiated by level, and there's a component of it that everybody has to do, which is focusing on the language and content objectives, and then there's different strands where they get to pick from what they choose, depending on what they feel they need more learning on, or they want to align to. We encourage them to align to what the school improvement work is at their school, their SLO, so they have some choice there. And there, as a part of that also, there's 2.5 hours of school-led learning that aligns to it and aligns to their school improvement plan work at their school.
So 2.5 hours asynchronous, 2.5 hours synchronous in the school.
That's right. And then 2.5 hours teacher choice. They get an additional 2 hours to choose what they want to work on. They could follow up on the learning that had happened in the morning is the intention and where we think it will go.
Okay. And so we have teachers come and go throughout the year. I mean, I've been in at least 3 schools this year that after the school year began, they got additional teaching allocations. So we're getting new teachers. So, and those teachers are going in classrooms in front of students. So how are we onboarding and ensuring they have these competencies, they have the training, they have adapted these practices?
There's ongoing professional learning for them, especially new teachers, especially with the new curriculum I think of comes right to mind. And then the consulting teachers, the majority of them will be assigned a consulting teacher that will work with them, and their staff development teacher will work with them to ensure that they get the support they need to be in front of children.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add was just to say the staff development teacher, typically, I'm going to give you an elementary example. If you have another elementary teacher that's added to a team, that team is going to wrap their arms around that person to make sure they're back to that collaborative planning, make sure they're on the same page. And typically the team leader will do that with the support of the reading specialist, staff development at the school level.
And my last question is for you, Mr. McGee. We're looking at a 3-year cycle of school improvement planning that began last year with a focus on our emergent multilingual learners. We're in year 2. How are you monitoring how schools, the impact schools, and each school's SIP is different, focus is the same throughout the system. How are you monitoring their achievement of their SIP goals? And when you're not seeing those needles moving, what are we doing in real time?
So the monitoring of that is basically two ways, looking at like the global data of the MAP Rs, the MAP, the ones that they specify on that. And then we have those back to the supervisory visits goal setting meetings. We meet with them, and when the data comes in, we're looking at that. We're looking at it shoulder to shoulder with them and seeing if there are celebrations. Great. If there's not celebrations, then we back to this differentiated support, then we can look at that through our team, through our partnership with our offices to say, what do we need to do differently at that school if what they had started on this pathway for their goals and their plan isn't going the way that they thought it would be. So the school improvement plan is really a living, breathing document that says, we plan to go this way. Now we have some data, like kind of the Plan, Do, Study, Act. Now we just actually studied the data. We realize it's not going in the right direction. We need to make a course correction. And we can do that. And they can do that in support with our office, with the Office of Curriculum and Instruction. So it's kind of like an ongoing conversation that we have with schools, in that we're frequently going into the schools, which like you talked about, the benefit of having more directors to be going into there and getting to know the schools at a granular level to make sure that we're giving the support they need and supporting them if they have to make an adjustment in the school improvement plan.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to go to my colleague online because we want to get to our schools sharing of their example. Yes, Ms. Rivera-Oven, go ahead.
Yeah. Although I appreciate you appreciated my feedback, I still had some answers. So thank you to Ms. Harris for following up on one of my questions and Mr. McGee for answering, because that was one of the questions I had. And the other question that I had was when it comes to the IEPs, and we have the number of kids in special education, I imagine that every kid in that category has an IEP, and then the breakdown with kids who might be EML and IEP. My question is, how do we inform the parents on how they can be partners in working with us? What is the mechanism that you guys have in place right now to be able to do that? Because we know one of the biggest issues that we're having with a lot of our Black and brown parents is that when they get these report cards, they're they really don't get the whole picture until it's kind of too late to do something about it. So how do we get in ahead of that in this training, and how do we doing a job in communicating that to our parents? And two, Ms. Hazel, I still don't know if all the administrators in our summer training, if it was 100% assistance, and if that included central office as well. And the last thing I have a question is about when you deploy these teams with our achievement learning specialists and others, are there any budget implications that you're starting to look at, that you're saying we need to have more boots on the ground because the need or the requests are bigger than we thought, since you already have done this for a year? And I guess that would be Mr. McGee, right? That you can tell us, you have enough folks doing the support? Do we have, enough folks doing the IEPs and following up on it? So those are the questions. And again, I would like to have a better idea of when the principals say that there's so a 76% achievement improvement, what does that mean? What does that mean exactly? They saw it in personal growth, they saw it in math, they saw it, in English, they saw it. What does that mean also for the 71%? Since we are going to be doing EML in January, you already heard some of my questions that I would like to know. I would like to know the breakdown of all EML students, including the ones who are born here. What's the percentage of EML students? How long did they stay in the EML programs versus the kids who come from other countries, and versus also like a breakdown of the kids who have had interrupted education with EML students, and what are the supports that we're doing with them as well. So that would be for January, but I'd like to get ahead so we can have some better data and understanding.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to ask Ms. Duran if she can just speak to the communication with parents from special education side, then we can.
Sure. Thank you. So as part of the special education process and part of the law, parents have specific rights that we have to ensure that we adhere to. And one of those, and we have the rights, but then we also have the human-to-human communication that really operationalizes those rights. When we move through the special education process, parents have to have prior written notice of everything that's being implemented. So what that means is prior to any implementation of anything, we have to send home what the plan is, what was discussed in a meeting in writing. When we have meetings, parents have to provide written consent if we're doing formal assessments related to special education, like psychological, educational assessments. We have to send documentation home to parents at least 5 days prior to a meeting so they have ample time to review it. These are the things that are in the law, they're in COMAR that we have to adhere to. Beyond that, there is, like I said, that human component. When we provided professional learning to all new education teachers this summer, special education teachers, one thing we really emphasized was that family partnership. Make phone calls right away, send home letters introducing yourselves, look up the family's background and determine, does your written correspondence need to be translated? Things like that, and we have to report on progress quarterly. Just like when report cards go home, we send home progress notes related to each IEP goal that a student has. So the bottom line is yes, communication, partnerships with parents is ongoing, both from that formal side and from that more informal conversational side.
Thank you. Ms. Healy, do you want to speak to communication?
Sure. So from the English Language Development Program, we have mandatory points of communication as well, similar to students receiving special education services. And we are very thick right now in the midst of one of our biggest communication periods. And so that's establishing students enrolling in the program. So we send home parent notification letters to ensure every year that parents are aware that their students are receiving English language development services. For our students for our families that do not speak in English, we ensure that we have the top 7 languages of the district. And we send home the information in those languages as well. Students then receive what you call an English language development plan, which has any accommodations or accessibility features that students have the right to have during instruction and for assessments. So that's another communication that goes home to our families. When students take the Access for ELS assessment and they get the results back, we send home the student reports of how each individual student performed on that assessment. And of course, we have what schools do, which is reaching out to the families. We partner with our different offices. For example, our parent community coordinators that are in our schools that have a high population, high density of emergent multilingual learners. Our parent community coordinators do a good job at being at the schools and communicating with the families. For the Maryland Blueprint, there is a position called a family coordinator. MCPS is, we have a lot of those structures already established, but with our Blueprint team, we are ensuring that more of those formalized communications happens with the family coordinator.
And Ms. Hewlett, can you speak to the percentage of administrators that attended training?
So this summer, and I think I can Ms. Rivera-Oven, was that your last question? Okay, so I'll roll into my part of the presentation because I think it addresses that. So this summer,
No, I'm just to say maybe for the future, I just then curious who monitors, whose job is it? Because it's a big system, right? With 211 schools.
It is.
Who monitors that this is being done, that the correspondence is being done, that the notifications of IEPs is being done? Like whose job is that? Is that Mr. McGee's job, or is that like who can say, you know, like, yes, 99% of our correspondence has been impeccable with our IEP students or with the EML students? Like who does it?
I can answer that easily. I think it applies for both the Office of Special Education and the Department of English Learners and Multilingual Education. Because these are federal programs, we have to be on top of all of it. And so the ELD teachers have a responsibility of generating these documents and sending them home. We've actually started a new process this year that is incorporating being able to upload these documents to Synergy so that centrally we can monitor as well, and schools can run reports to ensure that every single document is accounted for and that communication has happened. So we are establishing that. I know that for special education, they have their own database that they work with to generate these plans and send home. So because both of our programs are federal programs, there are tight guidelines and accountability measures that we have to follow, and the state audits us as well every few years to ensure that we're doing these things. So there is that federal and state feedback loop to ensure that we're establishing what students have a right to, the services that students have a right to, and monitoring that as well.
Thank you. Now, I think we will move to our school presentation. I think Ms. Rivera-Oven's last question is really talking about the school-family partnership. You know, we have formal communication, and you also should have ongoing communication with these families.
Yes.
So let's move to, we always love to have our schools to come in and share their stories in our building. So go ahead.
So I'll tee them up. And just say that this summer, the Department of English Learners and Multilingual Education held a system-wide professional learning training opportunity for all of our secondary schools. And that's the first time anything like this has ever happened, where we were able to reach beyond our English language development teachers, who we typically, those are really who we are able to interact with. And so this summer we were able to pull together every middle and high school instructional leadership team, as well as the English language development teachers and the administrators. We had 100% of schools attending. The attendance per school varied, so, but the majority of the schools had full representation of their core teams. Things happened over the summer. People got ill. Plans were already made for the day that they were designated to attend. So some things happened that affected attendance for some schools, but every school attended, and so we have a cadre of folks from every school who were trained in the functional language approach, which is a new arm of the WIDA framework and work that we're bringing into our schools to ensure that we start to match our instruction to the students who we have and today's context. So we trained 1,346 participants, and they engaged in learning on an asset-based approach when planning and teaching our emergent multilingual learners. And they learned how to make content instruction functional in order for students to use language and demonstrate their understanding. A functional language approach centers making meaning for emergent multilingual learners and connects the learning in ways in which students can see how what they are learning applies and how language works and connects with what they are learning. Simply put, it makes language visible and comprehensible for our emergent multilingual learners. So being able to train our schools on how to address language development across various content areas where literacy is the common thread was powerful. But the learning cannot stop at our summer professional learning opportunity. So today we have the principal and ELD content specialist. We do have, I do have to give the staff development teacher a shout out. She got a little ill, so she sends her regrets. And I know they are going to share the messages that she brought, she wanted to have shared. But we have the principal and English language development content specialist from A. Mario Loiterman here with us. I will turn it over to them so that they can talk about their experience with summer learning, but also the work that they're doing at their school and the need and how they're scaling professional learning.
Thank you. Good morning, Committee Chair Yang and Board Members Harris and Rivera-Oven. Thank you for having us here today to share about some of the work that's happening at A. Mario Loiterman Middle School. My name is Megan McLaughlin, and I am the proud principal of Loiterman. The Loiterman community has seen our population of emergent multilingual learners double from 19% to 38% over the last several years. We quickly realized that the shift in our population necessitated a significant change in every aspect of our school community. First and foremost, we are committed to the shared belief that all members of our school community are capable of great success, and they deserve to be viewed through an asset-based lens. We also collectively agree to developing asset-based classrooms that are inclusive and responsive by creating a physical environment that respects student learning preferences and is conducive for learning, building positive asset-based student-teacher relationships, fostering student engagement by promoting voice and choice, and establishing predictable routines and a gradual release of responsibility. Finally, we have developed the understanding that every teacher at Loiterman needs to provide English language development to our emergent multilingual learners in order for all of our students to experience academic growth. To become English language development experts, though, teachers would need to have a more in-depth understanding of the WIDA access for English language learners and the WIDA can-do philosophy. As the principal, it was important for me to be able to steer the work for our school to be able to address the data that we had. And as we narrowed our focus down to improving writing, it was important for me to create the conditions for the members of my staff to remain focused on writing. Teachers in all of our content areas embedded lessons where students were taught to write a claim that included evidence and an explanation. Students were then provided with feedback in the form of a school-wide writing rubric. This writing rubric contained language that came directly from the WIDA framework. We aligned this effort with our informal observation tool and met at the instructional leadership level, as well as within content-specific departments to participate in range finding of the student writing samples. While we did see the fruits of our labors in the form of doubling the amount of students who exited the English language development program and can celebrate what the collective effort yielded this past school year, we realized through our informal observation tool data collection that students were not being provided sufficient opportunities for structured discourse and reading comprehension strategies. This past summer, all 20 members of my instructional leadership team attended the functional language approach training provided by the Department of English Learners and Multilingual Education. This was the first time our entire leadership team had the opportunity to learn about valuable research-based strategies that would support not only our emerging multilingual learners, but all of our students. While it was very beneficial for my instructional leadership team to attend, it would have been even more impactful for my entire staff to learn about this approach during the summer to enable them to immediately begin designing instruction that incorporates the structures. Given these limitations, my instructional leadership team worked collaboratively to draft a professional learning action plan with the intent of adding the strategies of the functional language approach to our current instructional focus that continues to build upon last year's work around improving our students' ability to write claims that include evidence and an explanation. Setting the expectation to operationalize this learning, we have planned to share this learning with our entire staff throughout the course of this school year during our teachers' common department times. And we will continue to monitor the impact of implementation by conducting informal observations, analyzing student performance data, and gathering student and teacher voice data. We are very optimistic that our learning from the functional language approach training will have a positive impact on the academic growth of our students, but I believe we could have an even greater impact if there were more chances for all of our teachers to grow their skill sets by being able to attend professional learning opportunities designed specifically to support our special populations. I couldn't wait to experience this summer's training because we had some inside information from our ELD content specialist who is going to be a facilitator of the summer learning, and her excitement was palpable. I will turn the conversation over to her for her to explain the journey in adopting a functional approach to language development.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin, and good morning, members of the board. My name is Andrea Robinson Tejada, and I work at Loderman Middle School in the position of content specialist of the English Language Development Department. What I love most about my work is that I am able to support teachers while still remaining in the classroom. Coaching teachers is a passion, but the kids are my joy. Last spring, I had the opportunity to participate in a 2-day training sponsored by the Department of English Learners and Multilingual Education. The training was led by Dr. Luciana de Oliveira, and it focused around the language-based approach to content instruction that Tamara described. I was able to be a part of this learning as preparation for serving as a facilitator of that summer learning, which was eye-opening, and I mean, in a good way. That was being offered to all of the schools at the secondary level. And I learned in that day and a half things that truly, like strategies and approaches that truly transformed the way that I teach. I was so excited to try out that new learning after the 2 days of training that I immediately went back into my classroom the very next day and put it into practice. So I have to tell, I mean, Megan's not lying. The results really were remarkable, and I've been teaching this soft script, but I've been teaching for 23 years, and I've really not seen these kinds of results. So in my English language development class with 8th grade students at emerging levels of English proficiency, writing cohesive arguments supported by evidence and details was a challenge. And there were some compounding factors that I had to contend with, including students in my class who were identified with interrupted formal education, or SLIFE, and those students needed support when reading complex text. This instructional approach, it helped me identify the language that was embedded within the text. It gave me clear strategies to use with students, and it helped students comprehend what they were reading. It also helped reinforce this sense of community because students had opportunities to work collaboratively and to take academic risks. Through the use of the strategies, they were understanding what they were reading, and they could synthesize their learning through cohesive notes. But the real surprise came when it was time for them to form their own arguments. Because of this clear model and framework for their writing and the embedded repeated practice co-creating arguments, my students were able to produce writing at a level that I had not previously seen. And not only that, they were using the anchor charts that we created to go back and revise their writing for improved cohesion and clarity. To see a student who could not and then can the sense of self and the sense of achievement and accomplishment for them. It wasn't just me, so sorry. It really was incredible. And I couldn't contain, I think I'm on the wrong page. So what happens, I think, is that when students are competent in language, oh, sorry, I just lost my place. When the time came for the professional learning on the functional language approach, I was excited not only to serve as a facilitator, but to be a part of the facilitating team. And it was the firsthand experience of making a difference in the way I teach and the way my students met with success that I was most excited to share. One of the things I think about at the end of each day when facilitating professional learning is the fact that English language development is not only the place where students are required to produce arguments, but also how many of my colleagues have developed the skill set necessary to deliver instruction in this way. English language development happens across content areas throughout the school day. I've wondered lately how often we as educators are missing opportunities to amplify the language within the content simply because we're not yet equipped to do the work. We have to shift how we go about instruction, especially for our English language learners or multilingual learners. I'm often asked by content area teachers how they can scaffold tasks for students in the classroom. They ask this with the best of intentions because they want their students to succeed. Yet throughout the year, those same students continue to rely on the scaffolds, never developing the level of independence that we hope to see. And so if we want our students to be independent thinkers and learners, then the question we need to ask is a different one. What is the language students need in order to be successful with this task? By asking this essential question, then we also need to equip teachers with the necessary tools to teach the language of grade level texts and tasks. Because when you are proficient with English, that language is largely invisible. But for our students who are still developing academic English proficiency, that invisible language is a barrier, both to their content learning and to their ability to realize their full potential as learners. I believe that with focused professional learning, we can change outcomes for students by equipping them with the academic language skills necessary for success. My principal will be EPV, our staff development teacher, and she has just been a remarkable co-collaborator, and I was going to call her co-conspirator. She helps me do the work. She lets me bounce ideas off of her. We work together to develop professional learning, especially within my department, and then moving beyond that to the other content areas. And she will share, well, Megan will share on her behalf, how we continue to grow as facilitators of language development. So I'll turn it over. Thank you.
So from my staff development teacher, Emily Pariser-Velez, who is absolutely phenomenal. So one of Emily's key roles is to support the professional learning development and facilitation at Loiterman. Professional development opportunities targeted for students who are emerging multilingual learners allows the entire staff at Loiterman to better provide for a student group that continues to see a rapid increase in growth. Professional learning around research-based instructional approaches for emergent multilingual learners also supports our ability to provide targeted learning in support of our school improvement goals and benefits the school as a whole emergent multilingual learners and native English speakers alike. At Loiterman, we like to say that we facilitate learning for students. We do not teach curriculum, we teach the students. While 19.5% of students in Montgomery County Public Schools are students receiving English language development, as you heard, 38% of our students are emergent multilingual learners. If we include our students that have recently exited the English language development program, our percentage can get as high as about 41% of our school population. And if we were to include students who have ever received emerging or ELD services, our percentage would be even higher. We have an English language development department in order to meet the development needs of our students, but what we have realized at Loiterman is that we need all of our teachers to understand that in addition to teaching their subject matter, they also need to teach language development. When considering our current education context and teacher certification programs, we know that University of Maryland requires, as a student intern, 2 single semester courses as part of their teacher education program. One entitled Multilingualism and the other entitled Culturally Responsive Language Instruction. I'm assuming it's this one. And if we could look at Towson and McDaniel, for example, they do not include a required language development course for teachers. This means that teachers graduating from the programs coming into MCPS likely require on-the-job training or continuing education options to develop their capacity for language instruction. This summer's professional learning opportunity offered by DELMI focused on a functional language approach and allowed content teacher leaders and team leaders the ability to build their capacity, which in turn allowed this team to start building the capacity and offering learning experiences for our 75 classroom teachers. As we reflected on the learning from this summer's district-wide professional learning, we had to consider the impact of the learning for our school-specific context. We examined the work we were already doing at Loiterman, which focused on the written responses across all content areas, using updated and research-based strategies. And then after analyzing our access data, we found that the writing portion of the assessment was the area in which the students were scoring at lower proficiency levels. We realized that this area of communicating understanding was preventing our students from advancing in their language development and ultimately hindering their achievement in their content courses. When we zoomed out, though, from this assessment, that is specific just for our emergent multilingual learners, we realized that our native English population was also showing a need for increases in their writing production on both our district and state assessments. And when we dug into classroom data, we found that writing across content was actually creating a barrier for all students' achievement. Our professional learning experience this summer allowed us to bring back a framework for language instruction that we can use to continue to build on the work we started the previous year to address this need to develop strong writers. The ILT team is now able to have a team of experts within the ELD department to partner with to facilitate co-planning and co-teaching opportunities, while Ms. Robinson Tejada digs into the cycle of instruction and students learning with her department. We, as a collaborative team of both ILT and ELD members, are bringing the deconstruction of text portion of the framework of the functional language approach to all of our teachers as a starting point. Using the deconstruction of text as a focus on writing is empowering our general education teachers of all content areas to embed intentional language instruction into their lesson planning. In turn, this provides our emergent multilingual learners to access grade-level text and to have rich discussion opportunities. When looking at the work being done at the macro level, though, leader learning and school professional development, in the micro level through co-planning, observations, co-teaching, and individual feedback, the focus on functional language as an access point benefits all of our students, not only those developing English as a second language. As the staff development teacher, she's really excited to be part of scaling and supporting this work across our school. And we're excited for what this year will bring as we continue to learn and grow in our knowledge of the functional language approach. She looks forward to continuing the partnership with the Department of English Learners and Multilingual Education to support future learning and the refinement of our practices at Loiterman.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Maybe we should start with school example, STEM. Maybe that can answer some of our questions. So I really appreciate, Ms. Malahan, am I saying it correctly? Yes. So what your testimony shows that how training go to an action plan. That is what makes everything work, right? You take the training and you put into a plan to implement in your school. And that is the part I feel I believe intervention is most effective in the classroom. And the distance between central office and our classroom need to be as short as possible. And you just make it possible in your testimony. And what I heard from Mrs. Robinson Taharas is excitement, right? The excitement, the pride, but what I really hear is you have a tool to use. Not only it's the tool for you, it's the tool for your students, that framework, that those so they can take academic risk, right? And they risk not a way of just going to the deep end, but there's a way for them to do so. So now I'm trying to understand your staff development teacher sounds amazing with all the data assessment and analyzing those data. Can you tell me at your school, how often is your whole staff development? How often is planning time for different departments or grade levels? And how, what does coaching look like at your school?
Sure. So our schedule, we are an odd even schedule, and our teachers have one designated period out of the 8 periods of each day. So it's 4 periods each day. One designated period where they are together with their entire department. And that is the designated time for professional learning, it's the designated time for collaborative planning, and it's the designated time for data analysis. So there's essentially a cycle of sorts.
So that's once a week?
It's multiple times depending on the odd even schedule.
Okay.
So it could be between 2 to 3 times a week.
Okay.
And it's an 85-minute period. And so they are all together during that period with their content specialist, who would be delivering some of the micro learning as a result of whatever macro focus we have to their department members. Their department members would then, the next cycle of that time together, perhaps be taking those strategies and applying them or including them in their lesson plans that they're developing for their students. And then the following cycle could be people bringing back student samples of that lesson to take a look at how did we do, what did we miss, what do we need to go back and reteach or reassess based on that data analysis.
I really look forward to hear, this is the beginning, this is the first quarter, right? And then at the end, that how you have used these trainings to help move toward the goal on your SIP plan, like school improvement plan. I really look forward to hearing that. Ms. Harris?
Yes, your excitement about this work is palpable and exciting to hear about. And I'm just, I saw the look over here when you were talking about how the your block scheduling permits the grade level teams to meet 2 to 3 times a week for these chunks of time, which I'm imagining is invaluable to teacher training, teacher growth, teacher collaboration, teacher innovation. And so what I'm hearing here are like some best practices. And I know to a large extent, MCPS sort of phased out those kinds of block scheduling in our schools years ago, and I know my own son's middle school fought very hard to keep it about 10 years ago now, for a reason. And so I'm kind of looking at Mr. McGee, who's sitting back there, because I'm wondering, when we see this kind of magic happening, and this is magic, how are we scaling this? And I know we got 211 schools, everyone is different, but we have a school system-wide focus on our emergent multilingual learners. How are we taking this and really sharing the how beyond Loiterman to help other schools who have different challenges, but some of this is common. And I when I was hearing you talk about the focus on writing and the the practice you developed and the framework you developed for all students across all content areas and how that helps everybody. I heard some similarities to some of the information we got. I think it was from Lakeland Park Middle School recently when they were talking about a framework that they were developing to help their students with their writing proficiency, claim, argument, kind of. So I hear some commonalities, but what are we doing?
Well, that's the whole idea of getting into schools and knowing them so well, and having them sitting here at the board table is being able to replicate this and saying it's working really well here. As a director, I could go to a neighboring school, I can come back to our office and say to our chief, say to the other associates and directors to say, we have a really great model that's working right here. And again, it's back to a partnership that we have with other offices to be able to do that. But eventually that's the goal, to be able to share best practices all the way around and even have people from other schools come and treat this as a fishbowl. Yep. To come and watch and see, this is how it's working really well. How did they get to this point? What was the point of the conflict and working with, like you said, the staff development teacher sounds amazing. Unfortunately, she's not here, but to pair staff up. But that's ultimately the goal from our office, to do that. And the only way that we can do that is to be shoulder to shoulder in schools to be able to see that.
Yeah, and just last thing. So, Ms. McLaughlin, to you, leadership matters. And the tone you set matters, and the way that you build your teams and advocate for your teachers to get what they need to do this work. And I just wonder, did you have any resistance? Because as somebody said to me lately, change is universal, growth not so much. So.
Fortunately, we did not have any resistance. Our staff it's not, Loiterman is a unique community, and it is a challenging community. And so the people who are there and who have been there and the new people we have hired are all incredibly special, dedicated, caring human beings who are there specifically for the students and the families. And so when our leadership team came back with enthusiasm about this, because I'll say we put in a lot of work, and I've always said that I feel as though the people in our building work harder than anyone in MCPS, which I'm sure everybody says about their schools. It's hard to put in so much work in our numbers to barely move, given the specialized aspect of our population. When we have growth, it barely shows up on paper. Mm-hmm. And that's tough because of the amount of effort and energy that people put in. But when our team came back with that enthusiasm after this summer training, saying, I think we found sort of the missing piece that we've been looking for, everybody was on board to try it, because when it's all said and done, it's in the best interest of our students.
Yeah, so sometimes it's not just work harder, it's work smarter. It sounds like the training is giving people tools, right?
Yeah. And I just want to finish by saying I so appreciate the way the team is embracing new ways of serving this population of students, because we were really broken for a really long time. And we had some kind of painful meetings of this committee when that Cal report came back, and we're like, you cannot come to us. And I remember, Nikki, one of those meetings, and it was kind of, we were going back and forth. I'm like, you cannot come back to us and say, we're just going to keep doing what we've been doing, and maybe with a few little tweaks around the edges. And we were like, no.
Okay.
No. Evidence-based best practices. We have to serve these students better. And so I really appreciate that that's where we're going, and that's the work, and that is what is emerging from this. You're the proof that this approach is working, and it's working in a way that, and I can say this as a former MCPS teacher, people walk out of the training and they're rolling their eyes like, well, what'd I get out of that? They're like, I love that. And that's what you want. That's what you want. The people that take your training and take that knowledge back and share it out, that's what you want, is people grabbing it and feeling like, I am now better. And that doesn't always happen. So Congratulations.
So we talk about growth mindset. I say it's growth mindset for everything we do, right? So continue process. I'm going to go, I know Ms. Hiller, I'm going to go to online to Ms. Rivera-Oven.
And Ms. McClellan, I just want to say thank you so much for your leadership, but for making this a top priority and for recognizing that you had a population that was not getting the best benefits of what a school system can provide. And I think I am delighted to see this. And to Ms. Tejada, who is in the front lines, you know, she's teaching. Andrea, you've been teaching for 23 years. And you said something that really got to the core of me. You said that that we as a system, really, we needed to make the shift. Not the students, but we needed to come to terms with the fact that a major shift needed to be done in order to make sure that our students can achieve what they can. But your expressions of when you realized when that shift was made and the improvement of your students, I can only imagine how self-gratifying that is to see a population who they already have a stigma with them about not being able to perform at the same level, not being to speak language without an accent, about not being able to understand. But to see that shift must have been magical. So this is what I want to see. I want to see that magic across our system. I want to see how we, as a board and as a system and as leaders, how we make sure that that is going to happen across the board. Especially when you were saying your numbers that they, you know, you think there was a point even that you were higher than 41%, but that you also realize that this kind of shift not only helped your EML learners, but it helped every kid in that school, right? Which is the whole equity thing that we talk about. You're not doing something special for this group, but you're doing something to lift every child in your school. And guess what? When we do that, everybody wins. So thank you for doing that. And my question then to the leadership is, and to Sean and everybody else is, how do we make sure that that kind of priority is across the system, especially with schools that have a very high concentration of EML learners?
And I think, honestly, it goes back to what we were talking about with differentiated support. And that is something where, you know, we want to learn, we want a partnership with a school like Loiterman to be able to get in, to support them shoulder to shoulder. Maybe that means more support going there. Like I hear Ms. McLaughlin say, you know, we're not making on paper, it doesn't look like we're making, but you can hear the evidence of what's happening here. So how do we partner? And I say partner, it's not just the Office of School Support and Improvement, but it's all the offices that are sitting here at the table that are represented in Montgomery County Public Schools to make sure that what is happening here, this emphasis continues. And we look at that across the system and say, where else does it look like Loiterman? Where else do we have these areas? And then put the support to those schools. So that's the plan, and that's why it's a little bit different than what we've done in the past in terms of making sure it's differentiated.
Thank you, everyone. I know that's why this is an exciting year, as we are going to continue the conversation of how to support our students in the classroom, right? And so I want to thank, I know we have a lot more questions, but we are going to delve into our emerging multilingual learners in January, and our students with IEPs in March, and our highly able students in May. So we have another chance to a little bit deeper, specifically really looking at how do data drive our decision? How do data impact what training we offer? How do we support teachers, and how do we evaluate our effectiveness in implementing all these trainings and supports. And so thank you for all of you for doing a fantastic job today and answering our questions. And I want to thank the audience out there for joining us. I know a lot of people go back and watch our video even when they cannot join us at live at this time. So our next meeting is January 21st, 2025. Okay, stay tuned. Meeting adjourned.